acompanhando o segundo dia do 5º Congresso Sindical.
Plano Real, estabilidade da economia, globalização. O movimento sindical procura novos caminhos diante dessa realidade. Para discutir esses assuntos, 622 representantes de entidades sindicais de vários estados do país estão reunidos no 5º Congresso da Confederação Geral dos Trabalhadores. A entidade existe desde 1986 e com esse congresso, que começou ontem, está discutindo desde a organização interna, estatutos, regulamentos, até uma nova postura diante da economia, da política e da sociedade. Cerca de 30 teses estão sendo discutidas, envolvendo temas polêmicos como a redução do desemprego através da troca do reajuste anual por redução de jornada de trabalho, unicidade sindical, posição sindical com relação às privatizações, reforma tributária, desemprego. O ministro do Trabalho, Paulo Paiva, fez a abertura do Congresso ontem. Representantes de 3 confederações internacionais sindicais também estão presentes. O Congresso termina hoje à tarde. Zelda Mello para o Em Cima da Hora.
Mais um dia de violência em Hebron, na Cisjordânia.
All lawful, peaceful demonstration will be permitted in Hong Kong. Demonstration is part of our culture.
You can see that interview in its entirety in just under 4.5 hours from now. Every day, thousands of people cross the border between China and Hong Kong. Many of them are Hong Kong businessmen, and many have been marrying local mainland Chinese women in growing numbers. As CNN's Andrea Koppel reports, the marriage vows don't include a guarantee that the brides will live the good life in Hong Kong.
Compared to many other women in this country, 39-year-old Zhang Ping has a pretty good life. She runs her own small restaurant in Shenzhen on the Chinese border with Hong Kong. She has a young son she adores and a husband she loves. The only thing missing is her husband. 4 years ago, Zhang Ping married a man from Hong Kong. She has since been unable to get a visa to emigrate. Sooner or later, these difficulties will be solved, she says philosophically. It's not as though it's going to be like this for a long time. That depends, of course, on what your definition of a long time is. Zhang Ping has already been separated from her husband for years and has been on a waiting list for more than one. The average wait is 7 years. She is not alone. Of the 25,000 people here in Shenzhen who are currently on a waiting list to emigrate across the border, almost half, or more than 10,000 of them, are women, married to Hong Kong Chinese men. Another 10,000 are the children of these marriages, and every day the immigration office in Shenzhen is inundated with more applicants. The phenomena of cross-border marriages began in the late 1970s when this man, Deng Xiaoping, first opened China to outside investment and overseas businessmen. Now the local government has its hands full, trying to manage the growing number of mainland women and children who want to move to Hong Kong.
Hong Kong already has more than 6 million people. If we don't control the border, Hong Kong will face employment problems, medical care problems, housing shortages, and welfare problems. That would affect the stability and prosperity of Hong Kong.
But with the handover now just days away, more women are breaking the law and either overstaying their visas or sneaking in. In recent weeks, 26-year-old Wang Xiaofang, who is pregnant, has been temporarily living in Hong Kong in the hope she'll give birth here to her second child, who would then automatically become a Hong Kong resident. I'm afraid, she says. I'm just waiting and hoping that after July 1st, China will be a little more lenient and let us be with our husbands sooner. But the Chinese government has already said things won't change, and so Huang Xiaofang will eventually have to return to China to wait with everyone else. Andrea Koppel, CNN, Shenzhen, China.
Also in China, an explosion and a huge fire in a petrochemical plant near Beijing has left at least 3 people dead. The explosion blew out windows up to a kilometer away. More than 60 people were injured. Flames and smoke poured out of the plant hours after Friday night's blast. Local officials say a fire broke out in a storage tank area. They are still investigating the cause. Japanese police have arrested a junior high school student suspected of beheading an 11-year-old. It is a case which shocked the nation. The victim's severed head was found in a playground in Kobe last month. The killer had left a note taunting police and threatening further crimes. Terrified families had sought police escorts for children that were traveling to and from school. An uneasy calm has descended on troubled Albania on the eve of a critical vote there. No campaigning is allowed on Saturday. That's the day before citizens head to the polls in the country's parliamentary elections. CNN's Mike Hanna reports on the election in a country that has been racked by anarchy.
Albanians demonstrate their newfound democratic rights, while critical eyes from the outside prepare to judge whether a country's people can still exercise free choice at the end of an election campaign that's been racked by violence. The economy of Europe's poorest nation is in tatters, and the international investment needed to kickstart long-term development will depend on whether these elections are declared legitimate or not. The decision will be based on the information gathered by a team of election monitors drawn from more than 30 nations. Escorting them out into a countryside teetering on the edge of anarchy are members of a 7,000-strong multinational force. In effect, bodyguards to protect the observers from heavily armed brigands, many of whom are allied to political parties.
We have the right to defend ourselves. Second, we have the right to defend OSCE members. Third, in case we witness a criminal action, we have the right to intervene.
But the protection of political candidates is not in the force's mandate. Gunfire disrupts a rally being addressed by President Salih Berisha Thursday. Nobody appears certain of who is shooting at who and why. And as has happened so many times in this campaign, political activity is once again curtailed by naked force. Once again, the question as to what words can be found to describe an electoral process that's been spattered with blood.
These elections are not perfect. They will never be perfect given the circumstances. No, we haven't come up with a terminology yet because we haven't written the report. Let's see what happens on the day, and then we'll write the report.
The report, drawn up by international monitors, will determine whether or not the lifeblood of outside investment begins to flow. And as President Berisha wraps up the campaign of his Democratic Party, he knows that the country's economic as well as political destiny is in the balance. In the end, it's not only the result that matters, but how fairly the election monitors believe the result has been achieved. Mike Hanna, CNN, Tirana.
Just ahead on World News, a disappointing Earth Summit ends with more words than action. And Eastern Europe's economic tiger growls for recognition beyond its borders.
Usem látex não podem ser cortados. Os homens que vivem delas são tão preocupados com as questões ecológicas. A extração do látex hoje é feita da mesma forma como no início do século, quando começou o extrativismo da borracha na Amazônia. O trabalho começa cedo. Os seringueiros caminham quilômetros pela mata sangrando as árvores. Alguns levam toda a família para garantir maior produção. O látex escorre pelo corte e segue lentamente até uma pequena cuia. Enquanto isso, o seringueiro sangra outras árvores.
Eu costumo sangrar uma faixa de 200 seringueiros até 9 horas do dia.
É uma rotina dura, que só termina ao entardecer, quando o seringueiro percorre o caminho todo outra vez para a colheita. Num balde limpo, ele despeja o conteúdo da cuia.
Para o látex virar borracha,
É necessário um processo de beneficiamento que começa pelas mãos do próprio seringueiro e ainda de maneira rudimentar.
O látex é derramado diante de um fumeiro, formando uma bola chamada pela. E aí está o maior problema para a saúde do seringueiro. Ele é obrigado a passar horas exposto a uma nuvem de fumaça tóxica.
O meu problema com a bola, o antigo da borracha do antigo, que a minha mãe me ensinou a fazer, foi que eu perdi um lado da minha vista, sabe? Fazendo essa bola.
Mas uma solução muito simples está melhorando a qualidade de vida do seringueiro. É a placa de borracha defumada. Este novo processo evita o contato prolongado do seringueiro com a fumaça. A novidade começou pelo Acre em 1991 e de lá para cá vem sendo adotada também no Pará, Amazonas e Roraima. Primeiro, o látex passa por um processo de coagulação, assim como se faz com o leite para produzir o queijo. Numa bandeja de plástico, mistura-se de 5 latas de látex a uma de solução coagulante. 15 horas depois, olha o resultado. Agora é preciso retirar toda a água. A prensagem pode ser feita com um rolo de pastel ou até nesta engenhoca, inventada e construída pelos seringueiros.
Quase todo o material de trabalho é fabricado pelos próprios seringueiros. Agora você vai acompanhar a montagem de um tapiri de palha.
No interior do tapiri é feita a defumação das placas de borracha. O material, colocado numa espécie de varal, fica exposto ao calor e à fumaça, longe dos olhos e dos pulmões do seringueiro.
Tá bem durinha, tá bem preparado, ó.
A defumação da placa bruta de borracha agiliza o trabalho, produz material de qualidade superior, gerando mais lucro para o seringueiro. O preço é, em média, 20% maior do que pelo método tradicional. O beneficiamento do látex à moda antiga é uma página da história que o seringueiro começa a apagar.
A favela não é mais aquela. O Globo Ecologia escolheu 3 projetos arquitetônicos que contribuem para mudar o perfil das habitações em áreas carentes. Eles proporcionam mais qualidade de vida e dignidade aos moradores. Hoje no Brasil, milhões de pessoas ainda vivem em condições precárias, nas ruas ou em favelas espalhadas de norte a sul do país.
O Brasil tem cerca de 150 milhões de habitantes. Deste número, 4 milhões e 500 mil pessoas moram em favelas. É nas periferias das grandes cidades que vive a maior parte da população favelada brasileira. Em construções precárias, quase sempre sem água encanada, rede de esgoto e energia elétrica, essas pessoas são alvo fácil de doenças e dos fenômenos naturais. Por diversas vezes, as chuvas fortes causaram morte e destruição em favelas. Viver em uma favela significa dividir com muitas pessoas um pequeno espaço de terra. E as favelas crescem na mesma proporção do aumento da população das cidades.
Com tanta gente, tão pouco espaço e tantos problemas, fica difícil imaginar uma saída para as favelas. Difícil, mas não impossível. Com criatividade e boa vontade, um grupo de profissionais aceitou o desafio de transformar as favelas num lugar digno de se viver.
Vila Brás de Pina, periferia do Rio de Janeiro. Aqui moram 900 famílias, em casas com água encanada, esgoto e luz elétrica. Todas as ruas são pavimentadas. Quem vive em Brás de Pina está feliz. Só os mais velhos lembram que nem sempre foi assim. Pessoas como seu Edson e sua mulher Jandira. O casal mora em Brás de Pina desde 1952, quando o local era uma favela. Os dois acompanharam de perto as profundas mudanças que aconteceram em Brás de Pina.
A vida aqui era muito difícil. O pessoal vinha para cá, construía seus barracos, então, às vezes até de tábua de caixa, caixa de bacalhau, caixa de sabão. Então conseguiam fazer seus barracos, né? E como o terreno era charco, era pantanal, o pessoal costumava botar aterro, qualquer tipo de aterro. Quem conheceu isso aqui como favela, que vê hoje, não dá para acreditar. Foi uma transformação assim como do vinho para a água.
Foi no ano de 1967, quando a favela tinha cerca de 4.500 pessoas, que tudo começou a mudar. Uma equipe de arquitetos da Universidade Federal do Rio de Janeiro, conhecida como Grupo Quadra, criou para Brás de Pina o primeiro projeto de humanização das favelas da cidade. Sueli de Azevedo é uma das arquitetas que participou do projeto. Ela conta que os próprios moradores construíram suas novas casas. Sueli e o Grupo Quadra apenas coordenaram o projeto.
Nosso trabalho aqui começou com uma solicitação dos moradores de Brás de Pina e que mais adiante foi possível através da intervenção com o governo do estado e aprofundamos esses trabalhos de levantamentos, de análise do saneamento, do próprio questão da energia, e isso foi num desenvolver com a comunidade sempre participando desses nossos levantamentos todinhos. Emocionante de ver tudo aquilo que a gente viu em termos de mal resolvido, de saneamento precário, de casas mal atendidas. Hoje você convive com uma mini cidade com muita vitalidade, com casas com qualidade construtiva, com boas soluções. Isso é muito bom para a gente que tinha um sonho aos 20 anos e voltar aqui. É bom demais.
Não é só em Brás de Pina que a qualidade de vida está mudando. Aqui no Conjunto Bento Ribeiro Dantas também. Daqui a pouco vocês vão conhecer minha casa.
No próximo bloco, um projeto que começou com um brinquedo de criança.
Você vai ver como nossa equipe, usando um jogo de montar, projetou casas populares de verdade.
O Globo Ecologia volta num instante.
Incluídos da lista do MEC entraram com mandado de segurança e ganharam a liminar. Vão fazer a prova no domingo. Em Ponta Grossa, no Paraná, os estudantes de Engenharia Química, Veterinária e Odontologia da Universidade Estadual tiveram aulas de reforço para o provão.
Quando a gente for atrás de um emprego, com certeza eles vão dar uma olhadinha em que universidade você se formou, que nota ela teve. Eu acho que isso vai interferir bastante, né, se você consegue ou não um emprego.
Expectativa na Faculdade de Odontologia da Universidade de Brasília. Os estudantes participam pela primeira vez do provão.
A gente espera que essa avaliação seja uma avaliação justa.
Nota A no provão do ano passado, os alunos de administração sentem o peso da responsabilidade. No provão deste ano, querem repetir o feito.
É um peso que a gente vai tentar manter, né, um nível da instituição.
O provão também avalia o professor. Quantidade de cursos, tempo de dedicação à faculdade. O conhecimento do aluno é apenas uma das 3 notas que o curso recebe. Mas estudantes e professores acham que para o resultado do provão ser mais confiável, é preciso incluir outros itens na avaliação.
Eu acho que não está retratando ainda a realidade dos professores.
É uma avaliação incompleta, mas é um primeiro passo no sentido de avaliar as instituições de ensino superior.
A seguir, nossos repórteres mostram direto de Hong Kong como uma das capitais do capitalismo mundial vai passar ao controle da China comunista.
Em novembro de 1995, as casinhas de brinquedo de Demetri viraram realidade. A 10 quilômetros do centro do Rio, na favela Roquete Pinto, foram construídas 630 casas, em 4 modelos diferentes. Os sobrados foram projetados com 2, 3 e 4 andares. São espaços modulados, permitindo várias combinações, desde 4 até 28 apartamentos, ou casas, como os moradores preferem chamar. Cada casa tem 2 quartos, sala, cozinha e banheiro. No térreo, os moradores têm direito a quintal e no andar de cima, a varanda. Todas as casas têm luz elétrica e água encanada. O conjunto tem ainda rede de esgoto e coleta de lixo. As crianças não precisam caminhar muito para ir à escola, que fica em frente ao conjunto. O tipo de construção permite que cada casa tenha uma entrada. Todas elas são bem iluminadas e ventiladas. O conjunto, que hoje parece mais uma vila, tem até agora 40% das suas casas ocupadas. São cerca de 260 famílias que viviam em palafitas. A mudança transformou a vida de Dona Edna, seu Alexandre e seus 5 filhos.
Essa casa, paraíso, estou bem aqui, eu gosto da minha casinha. Onde eu morava tinha rato, eu via lá no meio daquelas sujeiras, lá aqueles ratos, aqueles esgoto horrível. Minhas crianças aqui estão bem, se sentem bem. É isso. Eu gosto muito daqui, que você tem liberdade de brincar, de correr à vontade.
Viviane, de 17 anos, filha mais velha de Dona Edna, conta que é muito mais feliz na nova casa.
Depois que eu vim para essa casa aqui, mudou tudo. Minha vida mudou completamente. Mudou tudo, colegagem, a casa não é a mesma daquela lá, barraco. A gente ia pro banheiro, as taubas caíam por cima da gente, os barracos tudo torto. Aqui não, aqui a casa é muito diferente. A gente nem sonhava em ter uma casa assim. Nem sonhava, né?
O arquiteto Demetri acredita que para transformar favelas em lugares mais humanos é necessário ousadia e criatividade.
Fazer moradia como essa não é tão complicado quanto parece. Primeiro porque gente gosta de gente. Gente gosta muito de morar perto de outras pessoas. Ninguém gosta de morar no meio do mato. Segundo, que para poder fazer com que fique barato morar dentro da cidade, eu preciso exatamente botar muita gente em pouco espaço. Dessa forma eu consigo ter os custos de água, de esgoto, de energia elétrica e da terra mesmo, que é muito cara, viabilizados por famílias carentes. Sejam eles que vão pagar, seja o próprio Estado, o próprio poder público que vai pagar.
Mas esses sobrados aqui na favela Roquete Pinto não são novidade. Em 1992, o arquiteto Demetri Anastasakis projetou o condomínio popular Bento Ribeiro Dantas, também localizado no Complexo da Maré. Esse conjunto habitacional recebeu o prêmio Arquiteta Adina Mera, do IAB, Instituto dos Arquitetos do Brasil.
O conjunto Bento Ribeiro Dantas foi construído para as vítimas das enchentes de 1988 no Rio. São 549 casas com soluções novas de aproveitamento de espaço. Cada uma com 44 metros quadrados foi projetada de modo que o teto da habitação térrea fosse o piso do morador do andar de cima. Em 1993, as casas de Bento Ribeiro Dantas ficaram prontas. Dona Cremilda e os filhos foram morar lá. Assim como os outros moradores, Dona Cremilda perdeu tudo o que tinha na enchente. Ela lembra como a vida era difícil no antigo barraco.
Quando chovia, a gente não podia dormir, tinha que ficar nas janelas para ver se a água vinha. Se dormia, com a chuva, acordava, botava o pé dentro da água. Meu filho, na época não tinha nem 2 anos. Peguei ele dentro da água. A enchente veio, minha tia acordando, ele estava dentro da água. É uma coisa de louco, triste mesmo, não tem nem como contar.
Animada com a casa, Dona Cremilda abriu um pequeno bar dentro do conjunto. Hoje quer esquecer o passado e aproveitar a nova vida com os filhos.
Sou muito mais feliz aqui, minhas crianças brincam, gostam muito daqui. Casa boa, 2 quartos, coisa que lá eu não tinha, era 2 cômodos. Para mim é uma maravilha aqui.
entusiasmo dessas pessoas nos deixa uma lição. A favela, que no passado inspirou compositores, pode voltar a ser um local de convivência harmoniosa entre as pessoas. Um lugar que os moradores têm orgulho de mostrar aos seus amigos. Um espaço alegre e criativo que sempre deu samba. O Globo Ecologia fica por aqui. Até a semana que vem.
Centuries of indignity followed. Restoration attempts only concealed Leonardo's vision under layers of glue, wax, shellac, and new paint. What was easy for Leonardo was difficult for lesser artists. They masked his work with their own. It was vandalized by Napoleon's soldiers who threw stones at it. A door in the wall was enlarged, removing the feet of Jesus. And harsh sunlight bleached the mural's original colors. Add to this mildew, water damage, and modern air pollution that has eaten away at the mural within as well as the outside of the monastery. During World War II, protected by sandbags, the painting was just missed by a British bomb. But it remained exposed, covered only by a sheet of canvas for more than a year. That the Last Supper survives at all is a miracle, but it survives only as a gloomy specter of Leonardo's glorious creation. A detailed analysis of the painting revealed the extent of the disaster. Microscopic photographs show how every bit of paint has been attacked by mold, dirt, and smog. This study sparked a decision to attempt a full-scale cleaning of the painting, to reveal and save what's left of Leonardo's genius, the last of the Last Supper. The effort will take many years, far longer than Leonardo needed to create the mural. It's all being done by one woman working alone. Panine Brambilla is a master of art restoration. She's undertaking the nerve-wracking job of removing everything that is not from the hand of Leonardo. With a special microscope, brushes and scalpels, solvents and fixatives, she cautiously picks and scrapes at centuries of paint and grime. She's even finding and removing wisps of cotton thread left from previous repair attempts. For comparison purposes, she leaves patches untouched. She will come back to them later. The process is achingly slow. In a week, she will clean an area smaller than her thumb. In spots where all that remains is bare wall, she paints an easily removable watercolor to soften the stark contrast. An accurate record of the cleaning is the responsibility of a team from Polaroid Corporation. The camera is a giant 200-pound version of those instant models we use at home, with a huge roll of film that creates life-size 20 by 24-inch photographs. photographs are almost indistinguishable from the real thing. There's usually an audience, tourists and school children who get to see not only a superb painting, but a rare glimpse at the art and science of recovery. Fears that the cleaning would destroy the remaining shreds of Leonardo's intentions evaporate with a look at the before and after photographs. They're stunning evidence of success. A slice of lemon appears sitting on a pewter plate. The hooks that hold a tapestry emerge from a once murky background. Simon's beard, lengthened by a restorer to cover bare plaster, has been trimmed to its proper length. Most dramatic is the transformation of Matthew. A 1908 photograph shows a blurred face, the colors and features undistinguished, the mouth closed. Midway through cleaning, the change is already apparent. A year later, the final result. A classically beautiful face. A sensitive mouth, open in shock and disbelief. As Brambilla carefully works her way across the mural, even with the loss of paint, the brilliance of what remains shines through. Unfiltered by the centuries, the power of Leonardo can reach us once more. Direct and undisguised. This is a medicine staff from Nigeria on display here at the Smithsonian's Museum of African Art. It was used by healers for hundreds of years. It's a beautiful piece. But the medicine men who used it are important as more than a source of intriguing art. 75% of the world still depends on traditional healers for health care. Folk remedies derived from common plants have given us miracle drugs for high blood pressure, heart irregularities, even cancer. In Africa, herbal medicine is practiced by the few remaining tribal doctors who know the secrets that are locked in these plants. But the plants and the doctors are disappearing. Scientists like Edward Ayensu are trying to learn all they can before it's too late. Ayensu, a senior botanist at the Smithsonian, is from Ghana. He's an expert on medicinal plants, and he makes frequent trips from Washington to Africa to study the techniques and herbal medicines of the tribal healers. Smithsonian World went with Ayensu to the Gong Hills, overlooking Kenya's Rift Valley.
Throughout human history, the people of this land have used the plants that you see around here as their main source of medication. In fact, most of the wonder drugs that have appeared on the market during the past 40 years or so have emanated from plants similar to what you see here. Who knows how many plant species containing cures for all sorts of cancers, arthritis, name it, man has already destroyed. There is hardly enough time left to discover the unique cures brought about by the aging healers of Africa. My old friend and colleague, John Mugu, is studying traditional healing with some of the best-known tribal doctors of Kenya. John was trained as a medical doctor in England. And tell her I'm so delighted to meet her. Now he is teaching biochemistry at the University of Nairobi Medical School. Elizabeth Carew uses rituals as well as herbal medicines in her treatments. Western doctors have finally become aware of what traditional healers have always known. A patient's state of mind affects his health. In Africa, rituals are a kind of psychotherapy, as important as the drugs themselves. Ceremonies can actually help heal.
This woman, Elizabeth Carew, was called a witch doctor by the British colonial government of Kenya. She was outlawed. But Carew defied the law and treated her patients in secret. Since Kenya's independence, she has worked without interference. Ayensu explains her technique.
Elizabeth is treating a woman for nervousness and insomnia. In the West, a tranquilizer might be prescribed. But she prepares an elaborate ceremony to determine the cause of the illness. The symbols are as powerful for the patient as they are for the doctors. The white powder symbolizes the snowy peaks of Mount Kenya, home of the gods. To make sure the gods are listening, Elizabeth plays them special music. Then Elizabeth reads her shells. They tell her that the patient owes a neighbor livestock but is unable to pay off the debt. Her orders are stern and to the point. Can't you see the debt in the beads? Why don't you go and pay this debt? Until this debt is paid, don't bother me. Look at it, look at it. Elizabeth believes that sickness is preceded by some kind of stress. In her society, the shame of being in debt can actually cause illness. It is this situation which must be remedied.
Elizabeth Carew knows that the health of the body and the health of the mind are connected. If they are not in harmony, illness is the result. It's an ancient concept, now backed by scientific proof. Western research has recently demonstrated that stress can lower the body's resistance to infection. John Mugu believes all doctors must comprehend the role the mind plays in physical illness.
In the African, in my part of the world, is not what is the process itself, the disease process itself, but what causes it. And what causes it is not the bacterium. It's not the cancer cell which is spreading. It is a belief that comes before that cancer cell which is misbehaving, that bacterium which is troubling you, is only a manifestation of something else which came before it. There is an antecedent.
Disrupt the body's equilibrium. Wangangi believes evil spirits can be sent by an enemy, or may be the result of breaking tribal customs.
His patient, Catherine, is a village girl who left her family for the big and bustling city of Nairobi. Like many African cities, Nairobi is already overwhelmed with young people looking for work. For over a year, Catherine has been bothered by headaches and blurred vision. She went to a Western-trained doctor, but he couldn't help her. Mwangangi says he'll give her some medicine, but first, he must perform the appropriate ritual. He says, God will help you. You will be completely all right.
This treatment, strange to us, is actually familiar and reassuring to the patient. It is packed with centuries of tribal beliefs that have the power to cure.
An animal horn draws out the evil spirits. Mwangangi tries to blow them out of her. Even the spitting symbolically cleanses the girl's body. If a patient believes in a cure, it's more likely to work. That's why placebos are often as effective as drugs. The body can heal itself, but it needs stimulation from the mind. Still, Mwangangi knows that herbal medicines are potent too. His treatment ends with a prescription. Some special herbs.
Drugs work better when administered by a doctor the patient trusts, and beliefs are reinforced by symbols. And our own medical symbols, the white coat, the black bag, and stethoscope, like the animal horn, may have curative powers of their own.
These rituals can't be exported. Belief in their power is limited to the society from which they come. But herbal medicines travel well. These plants, which grow in abundance all around Africa, naturally contain chemical compounds laboratories have yet to synthesize. But this is the plant that I really am very interested in.
Ayansu shares his knowledge of a plant's curative powers with a local student.
They will take some of these leaves and then put it in the soil. And somehow the juices in this plant kill all the bacteria and the soil heals very nicely. You know, this area has got a lot of very rich material that we have to investigate.
This is a living, growing, natural pharmacy. If you know what plants to pick, you can cure a minor ailment, a toothache or a stomach ache.
Those are the leaves.
And if that doesn't do the job, you can turn to an herbal specialist. Patients travel for miles to visit Barnabas Kiriu, one of the best in Kenya. For 50 years, he has studied the cures locked up in plants. Prominent Kenyans, including the country's first president, Jomo Kenyatta, have been treated by this practitioner, Barnabas Kiriu.
Kiriu speaks Kikuyu, a language unfamiliar to me. It is John Mugu's native tongue, and I asked him to translate. In modern medicine, you'll see that everything is labeled because most people cannot keep all these things in their head. How do they manage to remember all these different types of roots and leaves?
Barnabas
Kiriu says he can identify 3,000 species of medicinal plants and prescribe uses for their bark, branches, leaves, and roots. Healers collect these plants only at certain magical hours of the day or night. Science can now tell us why. The concentration of a plant's chemicals fluctuates in daily and seasonal cycles. Barnabas prepares his medicines by boiling them in water. The plant extracts are then filtered and blended. His skill with herbs is matched by his skill with patience.
Anaanza kuniuma hapa kwa kichwa zaidi na mwili yote. Sasa akianza mimi naanza kutawika.
he does not believe in private consultations. He treats all his patients together, families and friends included. Familiar faces give comfort and support. This is African group therapy at its best. There's no doubt that traditional medicine works, but for some problems it's not enough. John Mugu encourages traditional healers to send patients with acute infections and medical emergencies to hospitals and clinics. John asks the healers to keep a record of their patients' complaints along with their diagnosis and prescriptions. These records can sometimes reveal a startling success, remedies not yet known to Western medicine. John can give advice, but Barnabas and doctors like him have much to teach us as well.
This plant used for?
A herb that works for a village healer can be analyzed to find its active ingredients when brought to a laboratory. First, the plant is ground up, then filtered and distilled, then filtered again to isolate the plant's active chemical ingredients, the most useful medicine in the plant. With the help of a computer, the percentage of each element can be calculated. Traditional healers do not need to know a drug by its chemical name and have no use for technical equipment. All they need to know is that their medicine works. The information learned from chemical analysis can lead to new applications for traditional medications. Plant extract is commonly used in Eastern Africa to help a woman in labor. It is powerful in inducing muscle contractions. John Mugu tests it on a living rabbit heart. As the heart responds, the graph shows the ever-increasing magnitude of its contractions.
While John Mugu works in his laboratory, Ayensu continues the search for plants with the power to cure.
This plant, which is a common plant called the Madagascar periwinkle, is a common ornamental that you'll find not only in Africa, but in a number of countries in the world. For many years, it has been used in traditional medicine. In recent years, a number of my colleagues have been working on this plant, and they found out that it contains a chemical that is called vincristine. This is a chemical that is now being used as the starting material for helping to cure leukemia in children. And hopefully our research activities, not only in the laboratories but in the field, will help us to come up with such sensational stories as the periwinkle.
As long as these plants continue to flower, they offer us the secrets of their chemistry. In the laboratories in the hills and valleys of Africa, Western science and the traditional healers are joining their knowledge of the past and present to seek answers that may extend and enhance the lives of us all. Like the wild ducks that still take to the air today, millions of passenger pigeons once filled our western skies. But hunters took their toll. Finally, there was only one passenger pigeon left. Her name was Martha. In 1914, she died in the Cincinnati Zoo, which had named her. An animal, in fact, a whole species, was extinct. Since then, lots has changed. We take better care of rare animals in places like this complex of bird houses and flight cages in Washington. And we're better at breeding them in captivity. Here at the Smithsonian Zoo, the National Zoological Park, an urgent task is saving animals from extinction. It's estimated that by the end of this century, as much as 20% of the species on Earth may have vanished forever. A place like this has even more importance when you realize that more than 200 bird species face extinction unless something's done. The total for other animals is higher. All that stands between them and obliteration is the conservation and research efforts of the world's zoos. One highly successful story is that of a small creature called the golden lion tamarin. This tiny monkey, with its pixie face and lion's mane of flame-colored hair, faced almost certain destruction. In 1973, only a few hundred remained both in the wild and in zoos, and that number was dwindling. Golden lion tamarins display many human characteristics. They're monogamous. Parents and children live in close-knit families. Unlike humans, their natural home was only one place in the entire world, a thin slice of Brazilian coastal forest. That slice got steadily thinner in the 60s as settlers took over and destroyed the habitat of these marvelous little monkeys. Zoos couldn't save them. Tamarin babies were dying and adults were failing to reproduce. Extinction was almost certain. An acting assistant director of the National Zoo led the urgent rescue mission.
They can either color...
Deborah Kleiman, whose specialty is the reproductive behavior of animals, had to discover a way to breed them in captivity. With time running out, she was starting from square one.
One aspect of tamarin behavior that we knew nothing about, that we've since learned about, which has had major implications on our breeding programs, is that females end up very aggressive. They're much more aggressive than our males, and we've had daughters in the family group with their mothers ending up being attacked so severely that they've died.
At first, young tamarins were separated from their families to make way for the next batch of newborns. Separation isn't always a good idea. Kleiman's staff discovered that those removed grew up to be bad parents. They neglected their infants. Sometimes they even killed them. Tamarins have to learn by example, just as we do. Everybody takes a turn raising the children. It's hard enough carrying one kid on your back, but 2 or 3 can make for a delicate balancing act. Traditional jobs like this create strong family bonds. When it's the next generation's turn to be parents, they'll be ready. Kleiman wasn't even certain what the tamarins ate. In Brazil, she knew, they lived on an all-fruit diet. But fed fruit in the zoo, they were unhealthy. Only trial and error could provide the answer. Her research associates came to realize that fruit from the Brazilian forest has an extra source of protein they hadn't thought of: bugs. Once insects and other protein sources were added, the tamarins began to thrive. Only 10 years ago, the chances for the golden lion tamarin were slim. Today, in zoos around the world, there are nearly 400, half of which came from the National Zoo. There are now enough to begin a plan to reintroduce them to their Brazilian homeland. It's all because of Deborah Kleiman working with the Brazilian government and other conservation groups.
I think we've essentially saved a species that was going extinct in the wild and in captivity. And I think it's one of the few cases, it's certainly the first case with a primate, with a monkey, where we've taken an animal that was just going and turned it around. We're losing so much in this world. Habitats, animals, species are going extinct every day, and we're losing them, and there's so much we don't know, and we could know. And to take a species and save it and let people know about it, I think you're essentially helping people understand why maybe it's important, not only for that particular species, but to save its habitat.
Zoos have had success with other endangered species, too. The birth of Tina, a 10-pound pygmy hippopotamus, was a joyous event for the National Zoo. When full-grown, she'll weigh up to 500 pounds, a pint-sized look-alike of the big African hippos. The National Zoo has bred 50 pygmy hippos and will soon be supplying them to zoos in South America. The zoo is also breeding animals that need huge spaces to roam and gallop. At a former Army cavalry camp, 3,000 acres in Front Royal, Virginia, the Smithsonian is as close to reproducing a native habitat as an American zoo can get. The pair David deer are natives of China, but have not existed in the wild for almost 2,000 years. At Front Royal, they flourish with other rare animals. The scimitar horned oryx, the Indian saurus crane, the Bactrian camels.
The camel is surely one of the strangest looking creatures in the entire animal kingdom, no matter where we find it. But here in the heart of the crowded Northeast Corridor, only 75 miles from the nation's capital, their presence is absolutely startling. Here in the rolling hills of Virginia, usually known as horse country, the Smithsonian has created camel country, even zebra country.
Big game hunters no longer go out to capture animals for zoos. The bring 'em back alive days are over. Today, animals are bred scientifically at places like the National Zoo's Conservation and Research Center at Front Royal, Virginia. These are a few of the only true wild horses left in the world. They've shared the earth with us since the early days of man. Their ancestors once roamed in huge herds across Asia and Europe. Prehistoric pictures drawn on the walls of the caves of Lascaux in France show us the forebears of these wild horses. A military officer in the service of the Tsar discovered them in Mongolia in the late 1870s. The breed bears his name, Przewalski. A herd of Przewalski horses at the Minnesota Zoo are descendants of those same Mongolian horses. They have been bred so successfully, 7 of them have been sent to Front Royal, where they're kept under the supervision of Chief Curator Chris Swimmer.
Of course, they had been known by the natives of Mongolia for probably millennia. They were introduced to the scientific community of Europe in the late 1800s. Within 100 years of their discovery, however, they were extinct in the wild. What we're doing here is trying to establish a breeding population and also a group of bachelor males. That is, stallions which can be used as studs for breeding females in other parts of the United States and Canada.
Yeah, there you go. Sure. The Przewalskis feel at home in Front Royal and have little fear of human contact.
There you are.
But there's one place in the world where the Przewalskis are still allowed to run wild, living much as they did centuries ago. On the steppes of central Russia, near the Black Sea, is a huge Soviet research center, Askania Nova. Smithsonian World was the first Western production crew ever permitted to film there. Carved stones, ancient idols left by nomadic tribes, still mark the grassy plain. Askania Nova is twice the size of Manhattan. 28,000 acres where animals can roam for days without any human contact. 4,000 of those acres are set aside for Przewalski horses. Askania Nova is not only breeding unusual species for zoos, but working to improve domestic species and learn how animals interact with their environment. If you're looking for a home where the buffalo roam and the deer and the antelope play, try Askania Nova. But if you're a
frustrated cowboy, the discouraging word is that these longhorn cattle aren't from Texas, but from Africa's Watusi country. They graze with Banting cattle from Malaysia, Kulans from Asia, and an African crown crane keeping an eye on a new brood of chicks. They've created their own breed of deer at Ascania Nova. It's called the steppe deer, bred to thrive on this rugged terrain. Ascania Nova's scientists are even creating new hybrids by breeding zebras and domestic horses, which makes you wonder what will result. The African eland is the world's largest antelope. It has adapted well to the steppes. At Ascania Nova, they've worked for 20 years to domesticate the eland as a source of meat and extraordinarily rich milk, high in protein and butterfat. If all goes as planned, it will be the first domestication of a wild animal since the reindeer, 1,500 years ago. Managing species in protected habitats may mean that more species will have a chance to survive. For the Przewalski horses, the steppes of Ascania Nova are ideal.